Welcome to the Connecting Faith and Work podcast, sponsored by Ambassadors for Business. Gain insights as we host discussions with business leaders, industry experts, and entrepreneurs to help you learn that sharing your faith shouldn't be a Sundays-only way of life. Guests on the show offer stories and insight from their own business ventures to help believers experience work as worship in day-to-day business. God doesn't call everyone into full-time ministry, but He does call each of us to the purpose He has chosen for our lives. To learn what Ambassadors for Business can do to connect faith and work in your own life, visit us online at afbnl.com.
Today on the Connecting Faith and Work podcast, we have with us Ron Johnson. Ron has a PhD in philosophy from St. Louis University and teaches night courses for Spring Arbor University in Michigan. By day, he works in a customer service call center. He's the author of 2 books on connecting faith and work. What Does God Do from 9 to 5? And Customer Service and the Imitation of Christ. He's also written novels that invite readers to think about their places in the larger scheme of things. You can learn more about Ron at ronaldjohnson.com. Ron, thanks for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you with us. I'm just enjoying getting to chat with you a few minutes before the show. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell our audience a bit about yourself?
All right, Colleen. Actually, this summer, I celebrated my 50th year as a follower of Christ. I gave my life to Jesus Christ at the age of 13, just before I started high school. And that has been the greatest motivating and shaping force in my life. And that's really why I'm here, to talk about that and how that has changed and shaped the things that I've done throughout my life. 13
years old, that's kind of a good age for kids to come to Christ, just before they hit their wild and crazy preteen. The teenage years can be rocky for a bunch of us. Yeah, that's really great. 50 years, Jubilee celebration for you.
Right.
Ron, I know in the current world, God's kind of cast to the sidelines with many Christians who are afraid to admit even that they are Christ followers. What do you say to help those believers develop the courage to share Christ with those that they encounter in their everyday situations?
Well, I was in that same situation, Colleen. It wasn't so much that I was afraid, just that I didn't want to in the beginning. Just after I gave my life to Christ, this was the summer before I started my freshman year of high school, I had come from a very religious, I would say churchy background, and was very, very much not wanting to be the guy who corners you and tells you about Jesus. Really wanted it to be low key. And so it wasn't something at first that I was very serious about telling people about Jesus. But what I found happened is that as I went back to school and I started my freshman year of high school, it was completely different than the 8th grade or any other previous grade, because Jesus Christ was real to me. And here I was in this public place, in this public school, and everything was different because He was there with me. I sensed His presence. I got His guidance. He helped me with my homework. He helped me with my relationships with people and so on. And all of those kinds of things were so exciting and so unexpected for me that I just couldn't keep quiet about it. So in answer to your question, how do you overcome the fear of it? I think what you do is you invite God into your life at work, all the secular aspects of your life. And then you are just so filled with awe at what He does in response to that you just can't keep quiet. You just got to tell people about it. And that's what ended up happening for me.
So did your friends then notice a big change in you, or how did that give us kind of a play-by-play on that?
First change was a big surprise to me. I had, just prior to giving my life to Christ, there were a number of things that kind of led up to that. And one of these was, it was 1971. It was the television premiere of Ben-Hur. And Charlton Heston was my guy. I had already liked him from Planet of the Apes, and he was a kind of somebody who I wanted to be like. So then when I saw him as Ben-Hur and I see him coming to Christ and so on, was that kind of helped ease the way for me doing the same thing. But then after I started going back to school, and here I am, got the presence of Christ guiding me in my day-to-day life, what people started telling me was, "You are so funny." And Ben-Hur wasn't funny. I wasn't expecting to be funny. I was expecting to be dramatic, especially then after I saw Charlton Heston as Moses in 10 Commandments. I expected that I was going to be dramatic and I was going to make a dramatic impact on my friends' lives. No, what they said was, "You are so funny and you are so fun." And at first, I didn't like that. I thought, I'm not serving God properly then if they think I'm just fun or funny. And it took me a while to realize, no, this was what it looked like when God was working through me and changing me and making me the kind of person he wanted me to be.
So did you have other Christian buddies, youth group, friends? How did you first start to grow in your faith?
At the beginning, it was all very, very solitary because, like I said, I was in already a very heavily churched environment. There wasn't a lot of the passion of people who really were saying that they knew Jesus Christ personally. It was a lot of church youth group, and we'd go to church often. My dad would run the bulletin for Sunday. We'd visit people who were in the hospital and sick and so on. But there wasn't a lot of passion around people talking about their relationship with Jesus Christ. So at the beginning, it was quite solitary. In fact, at first, I didn't even want my family to know about it. So it started out with just secret, under the covers, with a flashlight, reading the scriptures and so on, and trying to just work out that relationship one-on-one with Jesus Christ. And then as that got going, then at church, it was just very surprising to me, the kinds of people who came forward. There was an elderly woman in our congregation who I didn't know. And she called me on the phone and said, I'm teaching primaries, which I think is very early elementary kids. I'm teaching the primary Sunday school class. And I just need kind of like she called it like a sergeant at arms, somebody to be with me and help me to kind of keep the kids happy and in line and so on. Would you help me? I didn't even know this woman, but we became lifelong friends as a result of that. She and her husband, up until the day that each of them died, they were just great friends of mine. The same thing happened with other adults as well. What I found at church was that it was mostly the adults, not other youth, who were reaching out to me. And the church leadership would ask me to be on different committees and so on. And I didn't think you could even do that when you were a teenager. But it really turned out it was the adults who were reaching out, really helping me socialize in my faith.
That's a really good lesson for all of us, for people that think that youth don't have abilities. I mean, when you become a Christ follower, God gives you gifts. Yes, they need to be developed, but they are there. And so that's really cool that the Sunday school teacher saw a chance to mentor and reach out to you and develop that. I know I recently was in my hometown and I went to the cemetery where my dad is buried, and I just kind of wander around when I'm there. It's a very peaceful place. It's the graveyard of a church that my great-grandfather built that church. Mm-hmm. And so I wander around and I see the graves of my Sunday school teachers from when I was a little kid. And it's like, oh, this is, the heritage that I am fortunate enough to have. It can be a great way to teach someone, is have them come alongside you and ask them. A lot of people don't know that they have a talent, and maybe they volunteer for something that isn't quite their bag of whatever, but they end up learning something from the person who is mentoring them, can make an impact in other people's lives. That brings us kind of to teaching. And I know you have been teaching at a collegiate level in philosophy. And when we return from our break, I want to hear a bit more about how you got into that, the journey, the path that you took along that way.
G7 Networking with Purpose offers best-in-class networking for Christians who want to share leads and grow their business on a faith-based foundation. G7 chapters are meeting right now and finding success by exchanging qualified leads with like-minded Christian business professionals in a closed and confidential format. The G7 meeting formula is the secret to its success. In each monthly chapter meeting, local members come together and follow the 7 G's of G7, starting with a short devotional, gospel, and ending with the gives and gets of exchanging warm leads. The center of the meeting is focused on God, because in all things, we want to keep God at the center of our businesses. Unlock your networking potential, because it's not simply who you know, it's about building relationships with your chapter members who know others that need what you have, and whom are willing to trust their reputation by referring them to you. These trusting relationships increase your warm leads exponentially through G7 chapter membership. Between meetings, stay connected to your chapter via the custom-built G7 app. The app is a great way to share and track leads, invite guests, seek advice, share prayer requests, and find other like-minded people to do business with. Members regularly tell us the personal and financial benefits they've been blessed with because they chose to join G7. Visit us online at www.g7networking.com to join a chapter near you.
We're back with Ron Johnson at the Connecting Faith and Work podcast. Ron, before the break, we were talking about your path of becoming a Christian and then talking about the advantages that it is to have someone mentor you, whether you're a teenager as you were, or whether you're just a new believer. Having someone that can say, here, come alongside me. And that brings us to the topic of teaching. I know you teach at a collegiate level in philosophy. Tell us about that and then kind of give us the background of what led you to that career path.
Okay, I teach now at Spring Arbor University in Michigan, and it is a Christian university. When I was doing my graduate work, I did it at St. Louis University, which is also a Christian university, and after that I taught for a while in Cincinnati at Xavier University, again, a Christian university, but I've also taught at community colleges that are not church affiliated at all. What I really enjoy about the Christian universities that I've taught in is that you get more of a network that works with you as the professor and helps you to mentor the students. So, for example, when I was teaching at Xavier University in Cincinnati, had a student who just wasn't coming to class. And I was about ready to write him off. I thought he wasn't going to be coming. All of a sudden he came. He said that he had a person who was mentoring him who had asked him to start coming back to class, and here he is, and and that kind of thing. And what really impressed me was that he took it so seriously from that point on, that when he struggled to catch up in his grades, but then when he did, at one point I accidentally gave him a better grade on a test than I was supposed to. My math was wrong. He called me and he told me about it. And in the background, I could hear his roommate saying, you fool, hang up. And I was so proud of that guy. I changed his grade out of respect for him, out of respect for his seriousness and his relationship with his mentor, of how he was going to go back to his mentor. He was going to tell him that he did this. And so I was very happy to go along with it, even though I knew it was going to make it harder for him for the rest of the semester. I think you had asked also, then how did I get into this in the first place? Over the years, God has guided me in a number of different ways to have a deep appreciation for education, not just education through institutional means like through colleges and universities, but that God is constantly dropping books into my lap, getting me in touch with people, helping me to find websites and so on that will educate me, that will teach me about things that I don't know anything about. And so I've really come to realize that a big part of discipleship is not just following what the scriptures say, but also listening for what God wants to tell you about the secular world as well. Over the years, I knew that I was at some point going to become a professor. I was going to get an education at the doctoral level. It took a number of years to sort out what that was going to be. But I was actually working at Western Union, started out as a telegraph operator and worked up to an operations manager, and loved it, and really seriously thought about continuing on with that. But finally, at that point, came to the realization that what God was calling me to do was get a PhD in the field of philosophy. So I left the work environment for a while, went back, got my doctorate, and then I thought this is going to be a real turning point in my life. At this point, then I'm going to be teaching full time. I'm going to be writing the books that had been developing in my mind, that I was going to tell the world about God in the workplace and so on. And then what I discovered after I got my PhD was that I just couldn't get a tenure track position. There were jobs that were for a year or two, but I couldn't get a tenure track position where you're there, they plan on you staying for years, you go through the path in order to become an associate professor and then a full professor and so on. That didn't happen for me. And I was crushed. And then I realized as I got into it, what I had to do was take a day job was similar to what I had been doing before when I was working for Western Union, only I started at rock bottom again. I went back to work as a customer service call center person for a bank, and I hoped it would be temporary. I did that by day, and I taught at night. It's been 21 years, and I'm still doing just that. What I discovered, however, was that although it wasn't at all to my liking, this was really where it was all going. I had that PhD. I had that ability to do the kind of higher level thinking that was required for the kinds of writing that I wanted to do and so on. I was still teaching at night, but also I was back in the work world. And for a number of reasons, that was very important to me. I've always felt that I was called to be in the working world, serving God in some capacity there. So that's what I do now.
The segue between the education and the career path. I think a lot of people don't really put it in their heart or think about, once I have my education, I'm going to go into my career and then I'm going to work. And then someday I'll have enough money I can save up and retire. And then when I can retire, I can go into the mission field or I can go into ministry. And one of the things I like to emphasize on our podcast, Connecting Faith and Work, is that if you are a Christ follower, you are in ministry. How would you address some of the people that would say, I'll put it off till later in my life, or I'm supporting missions because I earn this and I give this, 10% or whatever their number is? How would you open their minds to the idea that if you're a Christian, you're in ministry?
Sometimes it's just best to tell your own story. And for me, that was when I was in high school. I was a couple of years in now into being a Christian. I knew a lot more about how this works with following Christ in what was essentially my work setting, the high school. And I read, very proud of myself actually, I got for Christmas this huge book, what seemed to me like it was huge. It was Lloyd Douglas's book, The Robe. And I was just proud that, I'm going to read this from cover to cover. And it ended up, as I started reading it then, that I just got so engrossed in it that it wasn't about just trying to get through it. It's the story, and it's a novel, it's fiction, but it's the story of the soldier who gambled for Christ's robe and what happens when he gets that robe, and how the robe itself, he forms an emotional connection with that robe that makes him want to learn more about the person who wore it. So then he goes throughout Galilee, and here he is, an undercover Roman centurion. Nobody knows he's the one who actually gambled for Christ's robe. And he's going around talking to all the people who we know from the gospel record. He's talking to all the different disciples of Jesus who knew him, men and women who knew him in Galilee. And that was all, very interesting. But what really grabbed me was later on in the book when he has given his life to Christ, and then he's on the run from the emperor and from the Roman government. He is led by God to a little village called Arpino in Italy. Now, there is actually a city of Arpino in Italy. This seems to me it was supposed to be some other place. It's a smaller village that was just built around a melon grove. And he just happens to walk in, and he sees that the guy who runs the melon grove is really mean to his employees, and the employees hate working for him. And it's all about this working relationship between the owner of the melon grove and all the people who work for him. And Marcellus, the central character of the story, who was the Roman centurion, Marcellus starts to work there. He doesn't tell anybody who he is, but he becomes the scrivener or a secretary for the owner of the melon grove. And then he goes out among the villagers by evening and he gets to know them. And then over time, then he starts to tell them his stories about Jesus and so on. I was 16 years old when I read that. And I recognized my vocation when I read that chapter of that book. I thought, this is it. This is what I'm called to do. I'm called to go out into the work world and be like Marcellus. Ease the tensions there are in the workplace, try to make it a better place for the people I work with, and tell them my stories about Jesus. And when I announced that to my family, of course, they said, well, that's great, Ronald, but what are you going to do for a living? And then I still had to go on to college and I had to try to figure that out.
When we come back, we're going to hear about what your family's reaction was to this epiphany you had at 16 years old.
Whether you're a top-line producer, an entry-level employee, or a solopreneur, your work life should reflect your faith in God. Is your faith evident through the way that you serve and do business? When was the last time you asked a coworker, a vendor, even a friend, how you could pray for them? If that thought is uncomfortable for you, it might be that it's just unfamiliar to you. Ambassadors for Business is here to help. Ambassadors for Business offers tools and resources to help you discover your God-given purpose. Then the AFB Network provides communities of training and encouragement so you can have a real-life faith impact in your place of work. We work to help you cultivate connected environments where believers grow their faith together. The result is better connected employees, business connections with like-minded owners, and teamwork with eternal significance. We have something for every individual who is open to God using them in business for His glory. In addition to free online training via our customized learning management system and spiritual resources, we offer regular events for members. Here's what's coming up. Monthly Thrive events, when Christians gather to learn and grow together. Periodic events like Incubate, where budding entrepreneurs get a boot camp for their faith, work, life. Annual events like our picnic in the park in July or Kingdom Business Gathering workshops in November. Or special events like a fall color riverboat cruise in September. We are here to help you take the faith you celebrate on Sundays into your daily life all week long. Learn more at afbnl.com/events. Think Ambassadors for Business No Limits, afbnl.com, or simply search for Ambassadors for Business. Explore which upcoming events will help you get started today.
We're back with the Connecting Faith and Work podcast. We have with us today Ron Johnson, and he has been telling us about this fascinating book. I actually wrote it down as we've been speaking here, The Robe. It's not one that I've read, and it sounds like it had an impact in helping you determine the career path that you would eventually follow. You told your family about it, and they said, okay, but how are you going to make money at that? Tell us what their reaction was. And the other thing I want you to include is where their faith journey is. If they had come to Christ at the point that you did.
Well, even though I had said earlier that my family was very religious and very much involved in church, I didn't mean to denigrate that at all. My mother and father and brothers and sister were all Christians. It's just that they were so heavily into that. I just wanted to go my own path at first until I finally realized the importance of networking with others and being part of the church and so on. So my parents were Christians. At this point, by the time I'm 16 years old, we have a great relationship. We have a great relationship in Christ. So that's not an issue. It's just as I, as a parent, would do the same thing if my daughter were to come to me and say what I said to them. That's great, but how does that translate into a job? What the vision that I had was, I'm going to be like Marcellus, and I'm going to go wherever God happens to lead me and work wherever I happen to find a job, and I'm going to minister to people there, and I'm going to tell them about Jesus. Well, I was the first member of my family who went to college for a full 4 years and made it through. But at this point, when I was 16, we were just looking ahead to that. The ambition was that I was going to go to college. So, okay, what are you going to go to college for? Well, that was the thing that I prayed about, and I just couldn't make any sense out of it. At first, a lot of times when you say, I want to serve others, then the thought is you're going to go into some kind of helping profession. So that's what I kind of gravitated towards. I spent a couple of years in college studying social work, and I actually made it through all the classes in social work up to field placement, and I did not end up doing the field placement, but I had done everything else. And I knew about halfway through college, I knew that my passion just wasn't in that. I had lived almost a squeaky clean life, and I just wasn't a person who could go out and help others as a social worker. I hadn't lived, and I knew it. I realized it early on, and then it just became more and more something that I was aware of, that I would be dangerous as a social worker because I'm just too innocent. I haven't lived enough. But also, I just didn't have a passion around it. So halfway through college, then the summer before my junior year, I decided to pray and fast about it all summer. What kind of direction God would lead me in. I knew I wanted to be like Marcellus, but what did that mean? How would that equate in the work world? And what I was really looking for was a major. Ultimately, what I got as an answer to that, God showed me in a number of ways a whole new idea of education. That it wasn't just about what you major in, and it wasn't just about majoring in a particular thing and getting a job afterwards. But what God had envisioned was an entire lifetime ahead for me of education in which I'd learn about everything that God would place before me. Then just before I started my junior year of college I caught on passionately to the idea of education as learning God's story, learning about everything in the world, and learning how God is involved in it in some way. And from that fall of my junior year onward, I had a straight 4.0 because I did all my homework. I knew more than I needed to know for any tests. And then I was the kind of person then at that point who, when I was reading the textbook and it had a footnote for a book, I'd get that book out and I'd read it. And if that book had footnotes in it, I'd get those books out and I'd read it, because I had caught a vision from God of how a college education is just the beginning, and how there's a whole world out here to learn about. And God was my teacher, and he was showing me all about this world. What I ended up majoring in was history, and I thought I would go on and become a college history professor. But instead, that didn't exactly happen in the beginning, number of reasons why. But what I ended up doing was becoming Marcellus, just like I always had thought I would be. For a number of years, I just did a number of different things. I was a plate maker in a printing company. I was a produce guy in a supermarket. I was a substitute teacher in the public schools, an advertising associate for a suburban newspaper. I finally, at one point, became a telegraph operator for Western Union. And like I said, that ended up being a longer stint, and it led up to me being an operations manager, something I'd never thought that I would ever be. But then at that point, when I was now in a leadership position, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this is what it is. Then at that point, that's when it all became clear to me that I was being guided to become a philosophy professor. So I left that. It was hilarious. They gave me, at Western Union, they gave me a quote unquote retirement party at the age of 30 something. And then I went to school and then became a philosophy graduate student. While I was in graduate school, then I taught courses at the college level.
You've got a resume that's like mine. It's kind of like ping, ping, ping all over the place. I want that to be an encouragement for our listeners, that you don't have to always figure it out that, at age 13, I know that I'm going to be a doctor, because that, some people know that. Some people are in their 50s or 60s before they look back on their life and say, oh yeah, I see God was combining all these things together in my life to point me on this course, and this is my purpose. And he's been gearing me up and educating me for all this time. I invite everyone to come over to our YouTube or Vimeo channel to watch the bonus episode that we have. We'll talk this over a little bit more with Ron, the concepts that we're talking about here. You can find us at connectingfaithandwork.com. I want to remind you that we have new episodes that release on the 10th, 20th, and 30th of every month, and we encourage you to share those episodes on Facebook and LinkedIn. Help us grow our audience. More people need to hear about connecting faith and work. If you're interested in becoming one of our sponsors of the podcast, please get in touch with us there. Ron, I know people may want to reach out to you and find out more about your books that you've written and learn a little bit more about you, or just get in touch with you for a word of encouragement. Where can they find you?
At ronaldrjohnson.com.
Very good. Hear more episodes of the Connecting Faith and Work podcast on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us again, connectingfaithandwork.com. Thanks for joining us, Ron. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Connecting Faith and Work. To find out more, visit our website at afbnl.com or search Ambassadors for Business. We have tools to help you with everything from discovering your life's purpose to living out your faith every day of your life. Again, visit afbnl.com.